After you have acquired Bathory's first 5 albums, you're pretty much set. You've already gotten their most evil, wrenching, brain-rotting masterpieces. After Hammerheart, there's an obvious difference in sounds and the amount of ground broken, but most of it is still worth attention. Twilight of the Gods would be a more polished Hammerheart. It's longer with more symphonic arrangements, but more notably, Quorthon worked completely on his own this time. It's a more dynamic album than Hammerheart because the sound is bigger and the drums are pushed back a little bit. There are more backup vocals here, and sometimes it sounds like a chorus singing when really, it's just a bunch of Quorthons. With a lush atmosphere, the acoustic guitars, the Norse lyrics, it is the truest definition of Viking metal. Vocally, Quorthon is a better singer here than on Hammerheart. He sounds more practiced and his voice fits better with the music this time. He still can't sing, but it's nice to hear that he's trying. With this album, he tried to have a wider vocal range, but there are a lot of high notes that he just can't hit. There are also occasional narrative moments where he's not singing, but he's narrating the story of the song, such as on Through Blood by Thunder. I think Phil Alterman said it the best. His vocals are out of key as ever, showing why he has to refrain from doing live shows. The songs are mostly mid-tempo and slow, and they're not exactly written to be heavy or headbangable, but instead, the album is written to be atmospheric. There's an obvious classical influence too. It's like the guitars seamlessly switch from electric to acoustic in a matter of seconds. And the electric guitar tone has a power metal sound to it. I personally think that the songs could have been shorter, but it's a brilliant album. But this isn't a casual listen. This album demands your attention, so you have to be ready for it. My favorite songs are the first 3. The title track, Through Blood by Thunder, and Blood and Iron. If for some reason you only feel like listening to the first 3 songs on Twilight of the Gods, then guess what? The 2003 CD has all 3 of those songs in one track. So that's a 30-minute song that you have to listen to, and this is coming from the same label that told Edge of Sanity to cut Crimson into different tracks because one 50-minute song was just too much. In fact, the Black Mark CDs and vinyl have all kinds of pressing issues. You would think that Network pressed some of these. Record pressings since the early 90s have been quiet and noisy, and since the early 2000s, a lot of them have been sourced from the CDs. And some of these albums are long and desperately need 2 LPs, like Twilight of the Gods. But instead, they turn the volume down and just put it on 1 LP so it doesn't have a lot of detail. As for the 2003 CDs, some of them mysteriously combine songs. Like the first 2 songs on Octagon are mysteriously in one track now. The Woodswoman and The Lake on Blood on Ice are also put together. And on the albums that didn't have the Winds of Mayhem outro at the end, they now have them. Twilight was meant to be the final Bathory album, as he felt like he was out of ideas and wanted to focus on other things. But then came Requiem! He decided to take it easy, have fun, and go back to his roots here. It's a stripped-down, nasty-sounding, 34-minute thrash album! What we have here is an album that's fast, rifflicious, and angry. It sounds like a cross between German thrash and American thrash. Instead of doing his black metal rasps, Quorthon is doing death growls. I also really love how he's going all out with the guitar solos here, they're crazy! Also, Bathory the band is back. He is no longer working on his own. The production is also relatively low fidelity. You can hear the bass just fine, but the guitars are noisily distorted, and the drums are really loud in the mix. Speaking of the drums are electronic. Maybe if this album used real drums it would have sounded better and been heavier, but maybe it's a good idea that he used a drum machine here because now he's playing on time. Still a bit sloppy, but a lot less. Now, the original album has a significant malfunction. Normally, the songs on the CD are listed in the order they appear in, but no, somebody was so OCD that they put the songs in alphabetical order. Maybe the name of this album should be Requiem for Common Sense. All I'm gonna say is that this is something that the 2003 reissue corrected and got right. Now, the riffs aren't always memorable, but there's a lot of great palm muting, and there isn't a lot of variety between the songs either. Even the artwork isn't the greatest, but it's fitting. It's Bathory's Death Fest, an album for the Thrashers! It's the first Bathory album since Blood, Fire, Death where I've been able to headbang like mad. This album's a guilty pleasure. I like it quite a bit. Favorite songs are Necroticus, Pax Vobiscum, and Distinguished to Kill. In 1995, Bathory released their album Octagon. It really sucks and I hate it. Next album, Blood on Ice. Wait. Who are you? Are you me? Yep. Hi, me. I'm the real me. That's a nice twist. Anyway, you can't just skip Octagon. You gotta review it. Yeah, but if I talk about how bad it is, people are just gonna want to hear it for themselves, and I'm trying to spare them of the agony. Why not just talk about the good things? What good things? Okay, point taken. But why not just take the negative things and turn them into positive? I think I get what you're saying. You have to really admire the imagination employed within the CG artwork. I would rival this against the work of Jane Lane, Salvador Dali, and Thomas Rutt any day. The drums are insanely loud, very clangy and unnatural sounding, but I really love it, because real drums are for pussies. Bass? No need! Why would you care about bass? Don't even bother trying to look for it. That would be like trying to find the clit on Rapunzel's twat. The vocals sound really tired, but I guess he's Korthon, so after all, he's able to scream and growl in his sleep because he is a master. The guitar tone has no punch, but who needs mids and attack when you could just have a barrage of treble? It gives the album a very distinct sound of its own. You also have to love the attempt at groove metal here, because after all, you do need to experiment. To experiment, though, you don't always have to be great at what you're doing, because people will defend you until the end of time anyway. And the lyrics are so relatable because anybody could have written them. And they took a lot of effort to write, with some of the songs having random one-word lyrical lines thrown at you. Wah pedal riffs and solos and songs like Grey come from nowhere. But why be so predictable all the time when you could just do whatever you want whenever? Sometimes the pacing is slow, but that's good because you don't have to pay attention all the time. The evil sound of Requiem? Who needs it? The riffs sound like Slayer, because why do signature Bathory riffs all the time? Korthon needed a break. But it's one of those albums that you buy because Bathory's name is on it. And it's so good that you never need to listen to it. That's the power of Octagon. Blood on Ice was recorded mostly after Blood, Fire, Death, but wasn't released until 1996. Korthon felt that it sounded too different from a signature sound and fans wouldn't take it well. When the fans heard about it, he took some time to remix and remaster the album to make it complete. After 2 thrash albums, Blood on Ice was a return to Viking metal, but it also has some folk elements too. It's a concept album about a character that lives in the wilderness, but a man, probably Odin, comes to train him as a champion of the gods to fight the world's evils. There are lots of sound effects on this album of horses, hammers, and sword fighting. I find that the vocals are far better and fitting than on Twilight of the Gods, as he's singing notes that he can actually hit. But this album is more dimensional than Twilight, as on that album, most of the songs were slow and mid-tempo, but now you have more variety in speeds and sounds. It's really heavy, but it has brilliant acoustic guitars and actively involves more atmosphere. I find it more enjoyable than the previous 3 albums. With the production, you can tell that parts of it were recorded in 1989 and the rest in 1995 and 96, so obviously there are sound quality clashes. But you can also tell that the vocals were recorded in different places because sometimes they sound muffled. The drum machine was also more egregious, because it's notably more electronic sounding. However, I feel that it works to the album's benefit to make it raw and give it its own identity. Not only does it have the best artwork since Blood, Fire, Death, but I find that it's one of his more enjoyable and well-rounded albums. Best songs are God of Thunder, Of Wind and of Rain, One-Eyed Old Man, and The Sword. Blood on Ice definitely wasn't piss on ice like a lot of people thought it was going to be, but some people think that Destroyer of Worlds was! Actually, no, not really. You have a cross between Viking metal and thrash metal. Hammerheart meets Requiem. Almost. It's Bathory's longest album, a whopping 65 minutes long. So this means that it'll get a great sounding 2 LP pressing, right? Since it's way too long for 1 LP? So this is the quietest sounding record that I own, but this is really noisy. And even when you turn it up really loud, it still doesn't sound good at all. But that's not the only pressing problem that this album has. The track listing is wrong on the back of the album. Tracks 4 and 5 and tracks 8 and 10 are switched. Even the CD got this wrong. Seriously, this album came out in 2001. Everybody involved in the making of this album have been in the music business for decades. Maybe the title of this album should have been Destroyer of Logic. Anyway, Lake of Fire and the title track are great starters for the album. Ode comes in and the weird vocals return. Just listen to Death from Above. The vocals are not good, but at least he's trying. Pestilence is back to the angry moments of Bathory. The song Bleeding is Korthon shouting bleeding over and over and over again. I don't really like it. Now the drums sound better than anything recorded since Twilight of the Gods, and the guitar work is actually pretty heavy. Of course everything still sounds muffled and the vocals are low in the mix, but it's an improvement. It's a heavy album, but it feels like a stereotypical biker metal album too. Now, as far as the style of music, it changes from song to song. Sometimes he wants to play thrash, sometimes he wants to play Viking metal, and other times it sounds death metal-y. I also think that this album should have been shorter. It gets old after a few songs. Not necessarily a bad album, but it sounds kind of tired. It's like he was out of ideas and he just felt like jamming and creating music. Nothing special, but an okay album. Let it pass. 2003 saw the release of Nordland 1 and 2. Nordland, the land of Nord. Now we have these albums that are masterpieces. It's a no-brainer that these are the best Post-Hammerheart Bathory albums. But I would also say that these are some of his best albums ever. They're folksy Viking metal. Everything the past several albums got wrong, these albums got right. The guitar tone and riffs are crunchy, everything is powerful, and you feel empowered and good while listening to these. Plus, his voice is now at a lower register and it sounds great. Unique, savage, marching, and back to the glory days of the earlier Bathory albums while still being their own animals. The choral vocals are better than ever and the lyrics are well thought out. The first album in the set is more Norse-driven with folk elements, and the second album was more chaotic and guitar-driven, having more Viking metal elements. On the first album, the title track is absolutely amazing, and so is Ventureblot. Extremely heavy! Ring of Gold has beautiful acoustic guitars. The guitars are actually in tune this time. And the atmosphere of both of these albums, it's rich and it's cold. On the second album, you have songs such as Seawolf and Vinland. Really brilliant material. It's like he wanted to try something different with a style that he already established. The whole set is catchy and mind-blowing, full of great melodies, wonderful songwriting, and highly dynamic even during the calm and chaotic parts. You might not even notice the changes that go on. These albums aren't all bad. In fact, the Nordland albums were masterpieces, the 90s Viking metal albums were very well written, and Requiem was a guilty pleasure. For some of these albums, though, you have to be a big fan of the first few to really enjoy them. However, you have to understand that Bathory didn't just innovate and perform mind-blowing black metal, but they did other styles too. It's just too bad that as important and groundbreaking as Bathory was, these albums have been plagued with pressing problems. If you're going to talk about what Quorthon would have wanted, then he wanted things his way, but he also wanted the fans to be happy. And the best way to make the fans happy is to let them have the originals and have them sound good. Regardless, if you are in the mood for some obscure, swashbuckling destruction, then give most of these albums a listen. Yeah!